SMPS volunteers, and welcome to today's virtual roundtable for volunteers on venue and logistics for chapter events. This program will be recorded and made available on the SMPS YouTube volunteer training channel, as well as the library of the all chapter leaders community of MySMPS. I'm Julio Santos, SMPS Chapter Services and Membership Coordinator, and I'm joined today on the administrative side of the webinar by SMPS's Chapter Manager, Natalie Gozard. On behalf of the SMPS board and the entire headquarters staff, we extend a big thank you to all of you for joining us today, and for all of you that do serve your chapter members and society at large. Before we get started, all lines are muted. We encourage questions and sharing of great ideas during these roundtables. So if you have a comment or question, you may type your question in the question box, the question text box located on the right of your screen, and we'll take questions as we go or at the end of the program. Natalie and I will be looking for the questions. We're very excited for today's program to provide you some tips and best practices for consideration when considering and researching venues for chapter events. Our presenter today is SMPS Director of Education and Events, Dan Riley. Welcome, Dan and Natalie. Natalie, are we ready?
Hey, thanks, Julio. Welcome, everybody. Hi, chapter volunteers. So we are here today to provide you some considerations and resources for all the things that you might need for planning your chapter events and our programs. And if you've joined us today, you most likely are taking on the role or assisting, or you're interested in assisting your chapter plan for the events and programs that they put on. So on behalf of the society, we certainly thank you for all that you do and all that you are going to do. So we're here today to provide you some best practices and considerations when researching venues for your chapter events. Now, before I turn the program over to Dan, I'd like to remind you all of the resources that we have available for you in your role. The resources, first of all, we really recommend you work off your strategic plan prior to getting started. It's really important that you and your board examine the composition of your chapter. You really have to know your chapter members, their age, experience. You have to know the market affiliation of your chapter and the members' roles in their firm. And then you need to develop programs that truly meet the needs of all your members. Now, we know each chapter is different, and it's all based on location, market conditions, size, mix of members, and other dynamics. There are two excellent resources to get you started. These are two sections of our chapter manual. We have an education and certification section that covers programming, and this section is going to walk you all through the educational program planning, certification, and regional conference support. This document lists the 12 steps of program planning and includes recommendations for best practices, and the steps include such things as identifying program topics, speaker selection, and program formats, and marketing. Now, for SMPS regional conferences, I'm the staff liaison, and I connect with all regional committees to offer support from headquarters. So feel free to connect with me on all things regional conference. We're not going to get into those today. It's primarily events programming for your specific individual chapters. Now, the finance and admin section of the chapter manual, that covers the insurance provided for and available to chapters through our HQ service provider, which is currently the Novik Group. So the contact information for that group is within that manual, and we highly recommend that you reach out to them. That could be your first step on all things insurance. We're here to connect you with them, but they are your go-to resource for any questions that you have for insurance. Another resource is our SurveyMonkey account. Headquarters has a SurveyMonkey account that is for use for all chapters. I can provide you with the login and the username, and feel free, we highly encourage you to use the surveys. You can repurpose surveys that have already been created, or you can create your own, but use surveys prior to events. Really find out what kind of events your members are interested in, and then use surveys post-event for feedback. So if you have interest in using our SurveyMonkey, which I hopefully you will, please feel free to reach out to me. I can get you connected with that. Great resource. Another resource we strongly urge you to consider is creating an event checklist. Yes, it sounds simple, but this can really, truly keep you on track. And when it's saved, especially within your board community of MySMPS, or you share it with the other volunteers of your chapter, it's going to assist you with knowing what needs to be done, what was done, what was covered, and then you can save it for archival purposes for the next year or the next program. Now, we don't have one specific checklist that we encourage you to use. Rather, we encourage you to create your own. I did a search yesterday with Dan, and there are literally dozens of checklists that you can pull from for a quick web search. So each has different considerations, and you can use these checklists, create your own, use them to tailor for your needs and events, and then save them and keep going back to them, revisiting them. Lastly, a resource we encourage you to use is, ta-da, us here, the staff at headquarters. Our controller can review your budget. Our senior staff and Dan can review and provide comments on your contracts or as you prepare to go to contract. And me, as Chapter Services Manager, Natalie, I can connect you with other chapter leaders, and they can share best practices, get some information for them. These best practices are lessons learned, and we definitely should be sharing with one another. And Dan, as our events director, he's doing or has done event planning for the society, and he really can be your go-to person here at headquarters, the first place you can start. And with that said, welcome, Dan. I'm going to turn the program over to you, but I was hoping that maybe you would start with perhaps sharing with our attendees what your role really is here at SMPS.
Absolutely. Thank you, Natalie. Again, my name is Dan Riley. I'm the Director of Education and Meetings here at SMPS headquarters. I've been with SMPS a little over 10 years now and been heavily involved with Build Business, PLS, board meetings, our BD workshops, and any other needs any of our departments may need when it comes to planning an event.
Welcome, Dan. So Dan, kick us off. Really, what's the first step when we're looking at venues?
Well, the first step really is your dates and locations. That's going to basically make all the determinations for everything else to follow. Is your date flexible or is it firm? Many venues have a higher food and beverage requirements for evening events, first morning, afternoon events, and often higher fees for Thursday through Saturday programs. Those fees may still be reasonable and within your budget, but it's something to consider if cost savings is a high priority for you. You're going to want to ask the venue if there's certain days of the week or a time of day that they could offer you deeper discounts. Some venues, particularly restaurants and hotels with meeting rooms, they have frequent slow times and would offer more incentives to book your business. Another major factor is to be aware of any major city or industry events. These sometimes will eat up all available space restaurant needs in a city, but your local convention visitors bureau and local government calendars have these publicly listed, and I advise that you would check them out before planning any major events. Once you're in conversations with venues, you're going to want to ask if there's any other groups using the space at the same time. If that other group's schedule may impact your event, whether it's because it limits the use of your space that you want to use, or that group is a distraction. You don't want to plan a workshop next to a bachelorette party. You probably won't get the effect of the meeting out. But sometimes there's actually, I don't think it's a big of an issue for our members, but there could be a conflict of interest with any other types of groups or firms. If you like to use restaurants, you should also know that many of the restaurants are closed one day a week. Typically, these are Mondays. So if you had your heart set on a particular restaurant, you may need to adjust your date to set up a meeting there.
So Dan, I know ideally we would like the time and location of events to be convenient for all, and I know that's logistically impossible sometimes, but how can we at least make events convenient for the majority of attendees?
It's a great question, and a lot of our chapters are taking advantage of this. Early morning or after work events offer a lot of flexibility to your attendee schedule as it minimizes their time out of the office. Most chapters will have education reports for events that they've had in the past. I'd highly recommend you research those and it show you which events had the higher attendance, whether it be morning or afternoon or even a lunchtime program. But it's always a moving target as our members are constantly, their roles are changing and our new members are coming in with different schedules. Is the location going against or with commuter traffic? Traffic flow is a major consideration for location, congestion, pardon me, lost my note here. So yeah, location, traffic flow. Is it going against or with traffic? Is there public transportation? Is it parking considerations? For example, there are major restaurant locations and chains. They do market research to figure out what direction traffic is heading home. Their goal is to make sure you're just taking a right turn to get into their venue versus you having to actually cross traffic or go out of your way. This has actually shown it's increased their revenue goals. All right, you're also going to want to find out if the space aligns with your meeting needs. Is the room set up conducive to the goal of the meeting? Are you looking for a private room? Are you looking for a semi-private room? Private rooms are usually fully enclosed and you'll be able to do most types of meetings there. Semi-private, those can include glass enclosures. Obviously, it can be 4 walls, but you're not, everyone can see what's going on in there. Sometimes it's just simply a curtain, and that can be very distracting. You're going to want to check your proximity to distractions. Is the space around all the other customers? Are you near a service corridor or a kitchen, for example? If it's a learning environment, outside noise should be as minimal as possible. If it's a reception networking event, can your attendees hear the announcements without the need of AV, or will you have to rent all audio equipment? Will the venue be able to set up the room to optimize attendee experience? For example, if you have an instructional learning environment, you're going to want classroom or round tables. But if you're doing a networking or happy hour, cocktail tables, lounge seating, or open floor space is what you're going to want. Actually, I have a really good example of how this backfired for us. A few years ago, we had a BD workshop in an undisclosed location. It was set up in a private firm, a non-member firm, but they advertised that they had open space that can meet our needs. But it was right in the center of an open floor plan, and all the offices on the left and right perimeters were active and constantly walking through the program all day. And when the catering came, they all came out of their offices and were attacking the food pretty aggressively before members could actually get to it.
Yeah.
So whenever possible, and sometimes it's not, please go check out the venue in person before you make any agreements. So you're also going to want to ask yourself, what's the max capacity of the room? Will you have to put a cap on registration, or can you grow your attendance beyond the budget? Sometimes putting a cap on registration could be a good idea if you're trying to grow, buzz for the program, but you still have your budgets to meet.
Yes, we all have budgets to meet. So I'm listening to you, Dan. I'm looking outside here in Alexandria, Virginia, and it looks like it's going to storm. So I'm hoping we're not going to lose power, but that makes me think, how can we plan for outside risk factors such as weather that would affect events?
Yeah, weather is always a huge factor. When you're speaking with a venue, be sure to identify if they have an alternative space and the plan of action should it be necessary. They may have to make a determination 3 hours before or multiple days before if it's, if you're in a heavy weather environment. If it's outdoor, is there covered space where you can seek shelter should there be a quick pop-up storm? In the colder months, is there heat lamps? In the summer months, are there fans available? And if there's a max capacity of the alternative space, would you be able to fit everyone if you all of a sudden had to move from a beautiful outdoor venue to indoor space? It really changes the energy of the group. If you are, you set up a nice event with a beautiful outdoor space, beautiful view, wonderful day, a thunderstorm comes up and you have to force everyone into a 4-walled room with no windows, you lose the goal of the meeting.
Wah, wah. Yeah, that's
Right.
really, always be prepared. Well, that's great items for consideration on dates and locations for consideration, Dan. So let's chat the all-important budget considerations now. And I know each chapter, or I would be hopeful that each chapter has set their budget for the year ahead. And so you folks as volunteers have a great idea of what you're working with already. That really is a best practice. And I can recommend that you reach out and investigate other potential funding sources. So get with your sponsorship chairs maybe and see what they can do to help you out with deferring some of the costs. Maybe you can pick up a sponsor for 1 or 2 of your events. I know many chapters have almost all their events for the year taken care of, so that can really help defer costs. So Dan, share with us some considerations for budgeting.
Absolutely. One of the first things I do is reach out and I ask for catering menus. I ask if there's a room rental fee, get the food and beverage minimum, and identify what AV may be needed. If you have, if this is an instructional program, are you going to need projector, screen, laptop, excuse me, not laptop, wireless lavaliers, and can those venues provide those, or do you have to go through an outside source? As Natalie said, you may have already built a budget for a program. It might be a program you have yearly, monthly, and kind of have a good idea what your spend should be. But sometimes you want to do a new event. We're often trying new things here and trying to see if we can even afford it. So if you get this information, you can reverse build the budget to see if it's even something in the scope of what you're looking for, or maybe you have to reevaluate, see if it's not going to be at such a high-end location and change to a mid-grade, or just change the time of day, time of week as we referred to earlier. Sometimes it depends if you're using banquet spaces. You may have to contract additional service staff. This includes caterers and bartenders. And if that happens, you're definitely going to want to check with them to see if they had any preferred caterers. I apologize, my notes are out of order here. Okay, sorry. So once the venues have been narrowed down, you're going to want to find out the financial goal of the meeting. Is the goal to break even, maximize profit? Does your registration fee cover your expenses? Again, that goes back to building it in reverse. You've seen what the venue actual cost would be, and if you can meet those needs. Can you meet the required F&B minimum stated by the venue? I put that in here because as an example, there's a beautiful restaurant here in Old Town that we've been wanting to use for quite some time, and we've got their catering menu. We've looked at their food and beverage minimums, and they're out of our reach. We would maximize their space. We would use their preset dinner menu price, and even with 2 hours of open bar, we still fall well short, and it's very frustrating. They won't deal with us, but we can't use that space as much as we'd like to. Okay, and one important thing when building the budget or looking at fees, will there be alcohol served, and how will you set up billing?
So Dan, speaking of alcohol, when I've seen some agreements when I've been reviewing them, and I've seen hosted bar and cash bar. So what's the difference between hosted bar and a cash bar?
So great question. Hosted bar is when the event host pays for all the drinks. There's a few hosted bar options. You can bill on consumption. That means the host is only paying for the drinks that were actually ordered. A lot of venues will have bar packages. There it's a fixed rate per person for a set time period. It's usually recommended for personal or professional planning purposes to do the recommended to do the billed consumption, because I think the bar packages are really only you gain anything at weddings when people are really throwing down. But billing on consumption applies to drink tickets for any chapter events. Every drink ticket turned in, you'll be charged a predetermined rate by the venue. Now, a cash bar is when attendees are responsible for all their purchases. And so when you are setting up a budget or planning for an event, you can consider a combination. You can request a hosted bar for a specific amount of time before switching to cash bar. For example, you're hosting a happy hour from 6 to 8. You can discuss with the venue from 6 to 7. The tab is billed to the host. From 7 to 8, it's cash bar, and the attendees will be purchasing all their own drinks. Another example is designating a specific cash amount. You can say once the bar tab, including tax or not, that has to be determined by you and the host, has reached a set amount, say $1,000, switch to cash bar. That way you can make sure you're always on budget and align with your numbers.
That makes sense. So Dan, you're saying we need to budget for tax and service charges?
Yes, that's very important. When, just looking at the catering menu, it's not going to give you the final price. It's rule of thumb, additional 30%. That's 18, it's around 20% service and 10% tax. A lot of restaurants will have prepared food tax on top of city taxes. So 30% will keep you pretty safe, and you can request the specific tax rate from the venue. And if you are requesting those catering menus, oftentimes they are listed on there. Just got to read the small print.
Gotcha. And how should we be tipping? I mean, can you add a tip on at the end most of the times, or should we bring cash for the tip? How does that work?
Again, just the fine print. Oftentimes, that service charge for most restaurants will act as a tip, and it'll tell you it's 18-20% tip. If the service is above and beyond your expectations, always feel free to add more. But when you are in a cash bar situation, no, those bartenders are not being covered by any service fees, so your attendees should be tipping.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, so far we've explored, looking at venues, and we have a better sense of what budget considerations may be. So let's talk our next steps. I think we're going on to what we do on-site and on-site management, and I want to strongly encourage all the volunteers to really, clearly outline team member roles. Don't go this alone. For sure, don't go this alone. You really need to outline and come up with a plan, for example, of, who's going to work registration if you're going to have a registration desk, or who's going to be the greeter, who's going to be there to greet the new members and or the non-members who are attending your event. Do you have some floaters, just some volunteers who can be there to just be floating around, making sure that things are going well. So again, volunteers, really don't go it alone. So Dan, what are some big considerations for the venues now and on-site management?
Okay, yeah, assuming you've already signed, you're committed, and you're planning your event. Our members are obviously wonderful marketers. They want to get the word out. They build signs, posters, emails. You need to understand any restrictions that you may have when it comes to signage with the venue. Can you have signs outside the restaurant, in the lobby, or it can only be used in the space above? And actually, if you're advertising the venue online or any marketing materials, you may need permission to use them. They may actually want to require that you send it to them for approval first before you can send it out anywhere. You should also be clear with your service times with the venue. If you have a tight schedule, ask the extra staff be on hand to expedite food and beverage. For example, you have a 2-hour event, and first 20 minutes is networking happy hour, but you want 15 minutes of presentation, but dessert or something, or a plated meal needs to be ready by a specific time. Be very clear up front with that. They'll make sure staff is on hand to make you meet your goals. If the venue allows for outside catering, ask for their list of preferred vendors. These caterers have already been vetted by the local location and already would have insurance on file. Also ask, sometimes you may be required to only use their vendors, but if they do allow you to use an outside vendor, always understand the venue and the caterer's alcohol policy. Even though you may have brought alcohol with you, it may be illegal for you to pour it. You may need to hire a bartender with an ABC license, and obviously there's always a fee for every person you bring in. It's actually not unusual for red wine to be not to be allowed to be served at these venues.
What? Why is that, Dan?
Red wine stains, and it oftentimes it's very hard to clean up and can do a lot of damage when not held in the proper hands. When using an event that may require a caterer, does the venue actually have seating available, or are you going to have to rent that from a caterer along with the linens, along with silverware, plates? It all adds up, so be upfront, be clear, see what fees are actually covered and what's an additional cost. Sometimes they have very strict green or recycling policies. An example that we ran into, also working with one of our workshops actually at a member firm a few years ago. They were a LEED certified, maybe platinum, I don't recall, but LEED certified venue, and required that their caterers, any caterer we used, had fully compostable utensils, cups, and plates. These things are usually made out of, I think, cornstarch or corn syrup or something like that, but they fully dissolve so they don't build landfills. But we had to make sure we were compliant with the building code.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, you have to stay compliant. So I know, and personally, that dietary restrictions are very important for many folks. So how do you address these dietary restrictions?
Yes, this is kind of it's a very big thing right now. When hosting an event, ask on any registration forms you have, and/or send a follow-up email if if they did not answer, or if there's actually no form. It's just a show up. Just be very clear, because specific diets and allergies are on the rise, and you must accommodate to the best of your ability. Gluten and allergen restrictions are actually covered by the American with Disabilities Act. So you need to be sure to share any information, any allergies or restrictions your attendees have with the caterer and the venue chef ahead of time. They will be able to accommodate all of your needs, but the more notification you get, the better the attendee will feel about it. So, but you also got to let the attendee know where they can get their special meal, or how to identify themselves with the venue to request the meal that they had said that they would need. If you're doing a buffet, request that the chefs label all, the meal with all ingredients, such as that could be allergens, nuts, or if it's gluten-free, if it's vegan, just to have that transparency. If the person forgets to tell you ahead of time, but there is a requirement, you should be able to get them a meal, but they will have to wait, and it's kind of awkward when everyone else is almost done with their dinner and theirs is just being served. But it is a requirement by ADA to accommodate.
That's, yeah, very important detail. So Dan, I know when I review the events that are on our chapter sites, I always like to poke around and see what's going on, and then specifically when I'm attending a chapter event, I like to have all the info laid out within what I'm looking at. I want to know, will there be food? Will there be drink? If it's a happy hour, what does happy hour entail? Am I maybe going to get a couple drink tickets, or should I bring my own cash? So what else, what should be included in these event descriptions or invites that the chapters are sending out?
That's a great question. It actually leads to our next slide, communication. You should be as clear as you can with your attendees what they can expect on site. This should include directions to the venue. Is parking included? If not, how much? Is it near public transportations? Which stops? Will there be meals and drinks included with their registration fees, as you just alluded to? If not, because they want to know if they need cash on hand to purchase a few drinks at the bar, or if when it comes to meal restrictions, as you just alluded to, there might be a reason someone needs to eat every certain amount of hours, or for whatever reason. So they need to know if they're eating at 6, or if they're not going to be eating until they get home at 10. At what point will the meal service take place? They need to know, again, if it's you're having an awards event 6 to 10, will they be eating by 7, 7:30? What will be available to them? Or if there's no meal involved, they need to be told ahead of time to eat before they come, or make their own accommodations. Oftentimes, you might be dealing with accessibility obstacles. Here in Old Town, most of our buildings are very historic, so stairs are the only options to the second floor. Most of the buildings here along the main drag do not have elevators, so it can be very limiting to some attendees, but you need to communicate that ahead of time. Even things such as if you're expecting out-of-town folks, what the weather may be, what to expect. Example, we deal with a lot here, folks coming to Old Town Alexandria. We identify, we warn them ahead of time to wear proper shoe wear. The sidewalks here are also historic, and they're made of uneven brick and can turn a lot of ankles pretty easily.
Well, Dan, that is great information, great points of consideration. Thank you so much. Chapter volunteers, I would really like for you to keep in mind that prior to any agreement that you sign with your board approval, that you do know that you can pass these agreements to the staff here at HQ. Let us be a second set of eyes for you. We can serve as resources. Dan and the senior staff are happy to review and provide comments. And remember, the other great resources that I shared with you previously, those 2 sections of the chapter manual I referred to earlier. The finance and admin section is especially helpful for any insurance inquiries that you might have. the Novik Group, that's the agency that we retain for insurance matters. They are very responsive. I highly recommend that you reach out to them first. They can answer any questions that you might have. And then when you do create those checklists that I said would be helpful for you, make sure that you share those with us so that we can share them with other volunteers. You know, we want to be sharing all these great resources and collaborating. So now I'd like to turn the spotlight back over to Julio Santos and see if we have any questions.
Hello, thank you very much. It looks like we do have a few questions here, so let me get that started. We have about a handful. So Dan, are there any incentives for booking repeat business at the same venue?
That's a good question. I mean, the short answer is it never hurts to ask. You might provide great ancillary business for a customer. Say you have a monthly happy hour event, but a lot of your attendees end up staying for dinner on their own. They recognize that, so they might be able to offer deeper discounts to you.
Gotcha, thank you. And do you have any insurance info you could provide the attendees?
Actually, I'll refer that to Natalie. Insurance is a sticky wicket.
Sure, sure. And we always want to encourage all the volunteers to reach out to the Novik Group. As I said before, that's the agency retained by SMPS for all insurance matters, and they can chat with you regarding the general liability insurance that you have covered. Frequently, venues will ask for a certificate of insurance. You can get those through the Novik Group. They can also assist you with any special event and or cancellation insurance that you might need. So again, all that information is within the finance and admin section of the chapter manual, or just shoot me an email, any staff member, and we can direct you to the Novik Group. It's a great question.
Thank you. Do you have a checklist template you could provide?
I used one I kind of created, but as Natalie mentioned towards the beginning, a simple Google search offers just amazing resources of some that are probably even more ideal to each person, more specific to types of venues, depending on what you're looking for. But they're out there, they exist, they're very easy to find. So we would suggest maybe taking a few of them and customizing your own, and as she said, share in the chapter leaders groups.
Perfect, thanks. Another question here, where can we get copies of the chapter manual sections you referenced?
Sure, we have the different sections of the chapter manual. We also have some toolkits available, and those are all stored within the All Chapter Leaders community of MySMPS. They're located within the library. And if you're on this call and you are currently a chapter volunteer, you have access to this community through MySMPS. Again, it's the All Chapter Leaders community, and you can find the documents within the library. And again, if you need assistance locating the documents, or you would like for me to send you a specific section, I'm happy to do so. It's just natalie@smps.org. That was a great question. Do we have any others?
It looks like none at the moment, unless you see some that I don't see, Natalie.
I'm not seeing any other questions at this time.
We're always available should any come up.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Dan. I think we are all much better informed. I know I am personally on all things to consider when researching venues and conducting logistics intel for chapter events. So thank you so very much for your time, Dan, and thank you, Julio, for joining us. Chapter volunteers, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any member of the chapter services team at SMPS. Julio Santos and I are especially available and ready to take on any challenges that you might have and work with you. And again, you have the All Chapter Leaders community of MySMPS, chock full of resources to assist you in your role as volunteers. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. This ends our webinar. Hope you enjoy your day. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.